Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we are back with another Division Heartland video, and in this one, I think I might have come up with a plausible explanation for the strange development road that we've seen with this game. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it's just been such a long time since we've heard about the game. The first big round of private testing was done less than 2 weeks after the game was announced back in May of 2021, and while it was meant to stay completely private, the test scope, details, gameplay very quickly leaked online everywhere. And due to Ubisoft seeming uncaring, pretty much anyone who wanted to know was, and you probably still are, able to find out everything you want to before any action was ever taken on those who spread it. And what basically everyone gathered from that was that while the game was clearly in an alpha state, it was pretty far along in development. I'm not going to go into any detail, but the world was there, the mechanics were there, the systems were in place, and so I do truly believe that if Ubisoft had had a gun to Red Storm's head and said, get this thing out as soon as humanly possible, we would have had the Division Heartland long before the end of last year. Would that have gone smoothly? Probably not, and that would have been a whole different story, but what's been so interesting, frustrating to a degree, but also hopeful as well, is that Red Storm has taken and seemingly been given the time to put their heads down and keep working. It's been 8 months to date, since that big wave of feedback that they received. Until November, 6 months after that point, there had been no word of any further testing happening. Now, over these past 2 months, we've heard a fair amount of rumblings about testing happening on consoles. I've done multiple videos covering that, and as recently as a few days ago, the game was added to the European PlayStation database. So stuff is happening, but still nothing public. And in a gaming culture and climate where the norm seems to be, teams have to get stuff out at the last minute just out of pure necessity, it's been puzzling, to say the least, that Red Storm seems to have been able to take their time with the Division Heartland out of a pursuit to implement feedback and improve the experience. And in this video, I'm going to lay out why I believe it might not end there. I want to propose an idea that I've come up with that could explain some of why Heartland has garnered so much extra time in the oven, what Red Storm could possibly have been doing in that span of time, and why it leaves me even more hopeful for this game's eventual release. Let's dive into it. So I want to start off with a few baseline assumptions that I think are pretty safe to be made. We know that The Division Heartland is a free-to-play game. We know that Red Storm, a studio that is always focused on PvP in this franchise, is making it. Usually PvP-focused free-to-play games follow pretty similar paths. In that sense, I think it is safe to assume that The Division Heartland will feature post-launch content and a live service model, and because of its free-to-play nature, it's most likely going to include the traditional season model, with subsequent updates like Seasons 1, 2, 3, etc., and that those will almost certainly include a battle pass or some sort of similar microtransactional system. Whether that follows similarly to how The Division 2 does theirs remains to be seen, but I believe that this is a totally fair and safe assumption to make. Now, before moving forward, I want to take a step back and take a look at the wider gaming industry, because as I mentioned a minute ago, these days it always feels as though development teams are scraping by their deadlines. Games are releasing half-baked, clearly in need of more time, and one of the side effects of this high-stress rush production timelines is that post-launch content gets delayed as well. The most notable example of recent times is Battlefield 2042. The game came out mid-November after a 1-month delay, and now its first big post-launch update is nowhere to be seen. A part of the game's marketing was that it was going to adopt the common tradition these days of going to do free, seasonal content with an optional paid battle pass per season. And now, from what I've heard, the rumors is that their Season 1 update isn't coming until March, which is a full 4 months after the game is released. That's crazy. With the Division 2, the first season launched a week after Warlords came out. With the yearly COD releases, they usually do their first season like a month after launch. But with a lot of these other games, especially ones already affected by the pandemic, those timelines keep stretching and stretching. That's all to say, I have a bit of a theory. I wonder if part of the reason why Red Storm was able to land such a long delay period with Ubisoft corporate, and part of what they've been doing all this time, is not only continuing to iterate and polish the game from the alpha state it was back in May, but also to start working on and preparing the post-launch content that is undoubtedly coming. Because like I said, this game is free to play. If they can get it out the door in a working manner and in a state that players are happy with, then that's great. But Ubisoft isn't going to start making its money back until the monetized features of the game are up and running, namely Season 1 or whatever they'll call it and its Battle Pass. And so I truly wonder if part of the reason why we're seeing such a long period of silence is that behind the scenes, Red Storm is taking the extra time to not have to put itself through the stress that so many other studios are facing worldwide. Because let's not forget, Heartland was a prime candidate to be affected by the pandemic. It was probably 5 or 6 months into development when the virus hit. And so from my understanding of game development, that's, the prime window to have lots of collaboration and teamwork to get a game's foundation locked. And so I have no doubt that the game's development thus far has been slow and tumultuous. And it would not surprise me in the slightest if Red Storm is actively trying their best to avoid that happening again as much as possible. So what would this look like? Well, I wouldn't be surprised at all if what we see is that when the game is finally released, Red Storm is just ready to go. The game gets released. Obviously, there'll be a few weeks of firefighting to fix bugs that QA missed and that players find upon release. The early balancing stuff will shake out. But then probably within like a month of release, they're going to push out Season 1. What will that contain? No clue. I mean, hell, we don't even have any public information on what the game itself is going to offer. But going off the trends of other franchises, I think it's safe to say that we will probably see some sort of expansion or change to the game world, some new gameplay activities or offerings, some new guns and gear, a good number of new cosmetics in and outside of the Battle Pass or similar system. And so there you have it. To recap, my whole point here is, despite how odd the silence surrounding Heartland has been these past few months, I think it really could just be in an effort to avoid the pitfalls of so many other AAA titles and studios these days, both in the sense of thoroughly testing their game, getting feedback and implementing on that and polishing the experience at launch, as well as preparing post-launch support in advance, so that they're not caught in a situation where they finally release the game, the initial issues get sorted out, and then they're caught empty-handed right as the community is ready for their first batch of content. Based off of what I've seen, I truly believe that Red Storm is playing things as smart as they can here. There's no way to prepare for everything. Something could always go awry, and while it sucks for us to be left in the dark for so long, the longer we go with them taking things slow and doing more and more testing, it just gives me more and more assurance that things are going to go about as smoothly as they can at launch. Whether or not the reception to Heartland's game design is going to be positive with the community or not, we have no idea. But on a technical level and at a preparedness level on Red Storm's end, I do really believe that we are going to see them bring their A game at launch, both to avoid the failures of so many other titles these days, but also just to support their product as best that they can. And I also believe that that'll include a pretty ready to go post-launch support and content. And so with all that said, if I'm correct, then hopefully we can look forward to a top-notch experience when Red Storm and Ubisoft finally deem the Division Heartland ready to go. And as I'm sure you all know, I can't wait. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on to be updated every time I upload. Let me know your thoughts on the Division Heartland's ongoing development. Do you see the prolonged development and testing period as something reassuring or worrying? Personally, I think seeing it as anything other than a positive would be kind of hypocritical. The majority of people these days have caught on to publishers' tactics of pushing out their products before they're ready to go. And so to see Heartland having received so much more time in the oven after initial feedback is just a good sign that Red Storm has hopefully been receptive to the feedback and are continuing to craft the best experience that they can. That was something that the Division 2 sorely lacked, in the sense that its first big wave of feedback, from what I know and from an outside perspective, only came 3 months before launch in December, when they brought in a lot of those YouTubers and creators for the DZ reveal. But despite that, the game still launched in a pretty solid state technically, and so to see Heartland being treated much better than that was, I really hope and believe that that'll lead to a solid outcome. But regardless, we'll find out soon enough, so let me know your thoughts. I'll certainly be curious to hear them. That's going to do it for me today, though. Everybody, once again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.